Okay. Hi, everyone. I don't know if this is actually live yet. Say hello if you come on, and I'm reading just like it's 7:43. La dee dee. This is the magical moment in time. 7:43. And I did not plan that. That was cool. So there you go. Okay, so here we have the book that I'm reading. Okay. Chapter 7, the C with the I with the A control. A study of control must draw a tight focus on the programs of American intelligence agencies. General William Wild Bill Donovan in 1940 is believed to have been the first person to call attention to the need for an American psychological warfare division. Okay. Thus is explained the beginning of the Office of the Coordinator of Strategic Services, COI, that became the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in 1942. The COI, from its inception, was a black operation run by Donovan, Wild Bill, remember that, with little governmental scrutiny applied to the way it used its funds. There may have been another influence on Donovan other than the simple perception of the need for spying. According to John Marks in The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, clandestine lobbying by British agents in the United States led directly to President Franklin Roosevelt's creation of the organization that became OSS in 1942. Learning at the feet of the British, who made available their expertise, if not all their secrets, Donovan put together an organization where nothing had existed before. After the formation of the OSS, research has... Let me try again. After the formation of the OSS, research was launched into the discovery of a truth drug for use during interrogation, as well as into what would later be termed the Manchurian Candidate, hypnotically programmed agents and assassins. The popular coinage derived from the 1959 fiction book of the same name. The OSS, run by Donovan, was terminated in 1945. With American intelligence operations taken over by Allen Dulles and the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence continued research into mind manipulation, with an early emphasis on drug research. Early phases involved reviewing the drug-related work of a number of hospitals around the country for results which could be applied to covert operations. Although responsibility for the mind control programs that were launched in America in the early 1950s has been placed at the doorstep of the CIA, this attribution ignores earlier sources. These programs were the visible edge of a wave that had begun much earlier with the British, American, and Nazi eugenics psychiatric New World Order combination, propelled by Rockefeller and Round Table funding, with the most prominent agents of this group in America being the Eastern establishment's Harrismans and the Dulleses. Skull and Bonesman, W. Averill Harriman, Harriman's family, had promoted eugenics causes since the turn of the century. Harriman was also a major supporter, through his controlling interest in Union Bank, of Hitler's rise to power in Germany. In 1951, Harriman was named director of the Mutual Security Agency, elevating him to an influential position in shepherding the American-British military intelligence alliance. Harriman and his business partners, Alan and John Foster Dulles, also from a pro-eugenics background, were largely responsible for the increase of American efforts in the area of covert and psychological warfare operations, as well as for promoting the Fabian one world orientation that was the raison d'etre of the Council on Foreign Relations. Alan Dulles, the first director of the CIA, was in many ways the penultimate political insider. His family was an influential early supporter of international eugenics movements and had strong financial connections with the Nazis. The Dulleses were intermarried with the provosts and mallets of Switzerland, who in collaboration with the British royals had been European spy masters for hundreds of years, and it is said instrumental in injecting the Scottish rite of Masonry into the United States. Alan Dulles. Perhaps most important to their rise to power was that at the end of World War I, Alan and John Foster Dulles were recruited by the infamous one-worlder Colonel Edward House, who in fact bore no military rank. And during the Paris Peace Conference, the brothers were informally inducted into the Rhodes Roundtable Group. The Dulles brothers were responsible for starting the American branch, the Council on Foreign Relations, with funding coming from the Rockefellers, the Morgans, Bernard Baruch, Paul Warburg, and others. In 1920, Alan Dulles was appointed first secretary of the American Embassy in Berlin, and perhaps because of his family connections, took over American intelligence in the strategically key country of Switzerland. Dulles was chief of station in Bernay, Switzerland in the early 1940s. At the time that the efforts of LSD were purportedly discovered by Dr. Albert Hofmann, working for Sandoz Laboratories. At the same time, mind control experimentation using mescaline and other drugs were being used on inmates of the Dachau concentration camp, a scant 200 miles away. Alan's brother, John Foster Dulles, became the chief executive of the influential Sullivan and Cromwell law firm that represented the notorious I.G. Farben during the rise of the Nazis. I.G. Farben, run until 1937 by the Warburg family, banking partners with the Rockefellers, along with Rockefeller's Standard Oil of New Jersey, were merged in hundreds of transnational cartels. So that sounds like the whole thing, the law firm represented this I.G. Farben, and then I.G. Farben was run by the Warburg families, the banking partners with the Rockefellers, along with the Rockefeller's Standard Oil, and merged in hundreds of transnational cartels. So they were all very organized back then, still. They were in essence the same firm. After World War II, the president of Standard Germany, Emil Helfferich, testified that Standard Oil funds had been used to pay the wages of SS overseers at Auschwitz. So an American company, American money, bought and paid for the overseers at Auschwitz concentration camp. Got it. CIA mind control experimentation emerged full-blown under Project Bluebird in 1947 that sought an exploitable alteration of personality. Through testing a wide variety of drugs under the supervision of security operator Morse Allen. At the same time, the U.S. Navy was doing its own drug experimentation under Project Chatter, a project that sought a truth drug. In 1950, LSD was used on suspected double agents and North Korean prisoners of war under the auspices of Bluebird, and Morse Allen requested of his boss Paul Gaynor that the CIA acquire what was termed an electrosleep machine that had been built at a Richmond, Virginia hospital. Basic to the financing of mind control projects, Nelson Rockefeller merged 3 federal corporations into the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and HEW and its sub-agency, the National Institute of Mental Health, were used to fund Artichoke and other early CIA mind control projects. Other agencies involved in research into people manipulation at the time included the Defense Department and the National Science Foundation, the Veterans Administration, the Department of Labor, the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, the National Institute of Mental Health, and the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. Pretty much a lot of them, yeah? Not all of them, but quite a few. Big ones. Funding conduits for control operations run by the CIA and other agencies were and have been numerous, octopus-like. The Rockefellers and Allen Dulles established the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology at Stanford, which channeled funds for this type of research. Other organizations that provided cash for CIA mind control operations included the Macy Foundation and the Geschickter Fund, named after MK Ultra contractor Charles Geschickter. Another channel was the H. Smith Richardson Foundation, formed in the late 1959s by Bonesman Eugene Stetson, assistant manager for Prescott Bush at Brown Brothers Harriman, one of the largest private banks in the world at the time. The following is a listing of early major CIA mind control experimentation with brief descriptions, as documented in the Congressional Record in 1977 by the Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research of the Committee on Human Resources. MK Delta. This was apparently the first project established by the CIA in October of 1952 for the use of biochemicals in clandestine operations. It may never have been implemented operationally. I highly doubt that. MK Ultra. This was a successor project of MK Delta, established in April 1953 and terminating sometime in the late 1960s, probably after 1966. Now, this program considered various means of controlling human behavior. Drugs were only one aspect of this activity. MK Naomi. This project began in the 1950s and was terminated in 1969. This may have been a successor to MK Delta. Its purpose was to stockpile severely incapacitating and lethal materials and to develop gadgetry for the dissemination of these materials. Bioweapons. MK Search. This was apparently a successor project to MKUltra, which began in 1965 and was terminated in 1973. The objective of the project was to develop a capability to manipulate human behavior in a predictable manner through the use of drugs. MK Chickwit. This was apparently a part of the MK Search program. Its objective was to identify new drug developments in Europe and Asia and to obtain information and samples. MK Often. This was also apparently a part of the MK Search project. Its objective was to test the behavioral and toxicological effects of certain drugs on animals and humans. One moment, please. In the top secret memorandum for Chief Medical Staff Project Artichoke, deleted in original document, evaluation of INS role, January 25th, 1952. The question was posed: can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against such fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation? In a moment of candor, as he spoke before Princeton alumni in 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles spoke about two fronts in the battle for men's minds. He said the first front in America was indoctrination, both through censorship as well as public relations techniques. And a second vital and more specialized front was individual brainwashing and brain changing. Using the justification that communist mind control programs were more advanced than those of their American counterpart programs, MKUltra was authorized 3 days after Dulles's pep talk. Created as an adjunct to the Artichoke program, $300,000 initially funded this highly secret compartmented umbrella program researching mind control. The great majority of MKUltra programs were black or undocumented programs about which little that has ever been revealed. What is documented of MKUltra, however, is horrific enough to provide scripts for 100 grisly horror films, and to provide credibility to the monstrous stories about mind control programs that surface to this day. The primary administrator for CIA mind control programs was Sidney Gottlieb, who had a doctorate in biochemistry from Caltech. At age 33, he headed up the agency's Technical Services Division, presiding over MKUltra and its minimum of 149 subsets conducted in universities, hospitals, prisons, and military institutions across the country, as he would until 1973. The strange Levian Gottlieb compensated for a clubfoot and a severe stammer by being an avid folk dancer, demonstrating new steps before his coworkers and after his return from foreign lands. An excerpt from a characteristic Gottlieb memo follows. Here we go. 11th May 1953. Memorandum for the record subject. Visit to project deleted. The general picture, on this day, the writer spent the day observing experiments. Mr. Deleted has already submitted his proposal to the deleted. 2. The general picture of the present status of the project is one of a carefully planned series of 5 major experiments. Most of the year has been spent in screening and standardizing a large group of subjects, approximately 100, and the months between now and September 1st should yield much data, so that these 5 experiments should be completed by September 1st. The 5 experiments are, parentheses, N stands for the total number of subjects involved in the experiment. Experiment 1, N18. Hypnotically induced anxieties to be completed by September 1st. Experiment 2, N24. Hypnotically increasing ability to learn and recall complex written matter to be completed by September 1st. Experiment 3, N3. Polygraph response under hypnosis to be completed by June 15th. Experiment 4, N24. Hypnotically increasing ability to observe and recall a complex arrangement of physical objects. Experiment 5, N100. Relationship of personality to susceptibility to hypnosis. The work for next year, September 1st, 1953 to June 1st, 1954, will concentrate on Experiment 6, the Morse code program, with the emphasis on relatively lower IQ subjects than found on university volunteers. And then deleted material. Experiment 7, recall of hypnotically acquired information by very specific signals. Deleted. Will submit detailed research plans on all experiments not yet submitted. Among other experiments authorized by Gottlieb were those of Dr. Harris Isbell, who ran the Center for Addiction Research in Lexington, Kentucky. Using black heroin addicts as research fodder, Isbell tested more than 800 psychoactive chemicals shipped to him directly from Gottlieb. In one experiment, Isbell kept 7 addicts stoned on quadruple normal dosages of LSD without interruption for 77 days. 7 for 77 days. 777. Remember who that is, right? Crowley. Jolting them with electroshock to wake them when they fell asleep. In another experiment, Isbell strapped 9 men to gurneys, inserted rectal thermometers, shot them up with massive hits of psilocybin, shined lights in their eyes to check pupil dilation, and pounded on their joints to test nervous system response. The subjects of Isbell's torture garden were paid off with heroin fixes. In 1952, Gottlieb collaborated with government drug agent George White, setting him up in Operation Midnight Climax. Safe houses decorated to resemble bordellos were set up in both New York and San Francisco, where men would be lured by prostitutes and then dosed with LSD without their knowledge. In most cases, the victims were given LSD-spiked drinks, but in at least one instance, LSD gas was sprayed into the restroom before the John entered the John. The ever-curious White observed the unsuspecting victims through a mirror while sitting on a portable toilet sipping Gibsons. As with most accounts of CIA testing, one suspects that more was going on than was documented. My own suspicion is that White's ultimate mission was to obtain compromising information on crime figures and perhaps politicians in an ancient, by then, drugging and prostitution ruse. Other participants in MKUltra and programs that followed were recruited from approximately 5,000 Nazis brought from Germany immediately after World War II through the clandestine Project Paperclip. These included Karl Taubach, a Nazi expert on sterilization drugs, and a chief plant chemist at IG Farben. Theodor Wagner-Jereg, Kurt Rahr, and Hans Turnet, who continued their wartime research on superpersons like Sarin and Tauben. SS Brigadier General Walter Scheiber, a specialist in chemical warfare and nerve gas. Dr. Hubertus Strughold, who worked in MKUltra as well as at NASA. According to a report by the Jewish Telegraphic Agency in 1995, quote, "The sadistic Nazi background of a late German scientist has resulted in plans to remove his name from a U.S. Air Force library." In 1993, soon after the scientist's background was first uncovered, his portrait was removed from a mural of medical heroes at Ohio State University. Scientist Hubertus Strughold, who died in 1986, was secretly brought to the United States in 1945 to work on the space program. Even though he was sought for persecution in Nuremberg. The library at the School of Aerospace Medicine at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas has been named to honor Strughold, who helped develop the pressure suits used by astronauts as well as the U.S. space capsule. As the head of Nazi Germany's Air Force Institute for Aviation Medicine, Strughold participated in a 1942 conference that discussed experiments on human beings. The experiments included subjecting Dachau concentration camp inmates to torture and death. Curiously, another MKUltra faction consisted of representatives of the Scottish Rite of Masonry, which had sponsored research into eugenics, psychiatry, and mind control since at least the 30s. MKUltra Dr. Robert Hannah Felix was Director of Psychiatric Research for the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and the Director of the National Institute of Mental Health. Felix was the immediate senior of Dr. Harris Isbell, already noted in relation to MKUltra. Another prominent Freemason involved in MKUltra was Dr. Paul Hock. Financed by the Army Chemical Center, a member of the American Eugenics Society, Hock was co-director with Nazi eugenicist Franz Kallmann in research at Columbia University's New York State Psychiatric Institute. Other participants in mind control programs were garden variety American fascists and sadists who saw intelligence agency work as being the perfect milieu for fulfilling their own murderous desires. Among the areas investigated during MKUltra were brain surgery, including lobotomy, the use of electrical and chemical shock, the effects of stress on human beings, including hunger, fear, fatigue, duress, and torture, narcoanalysis, handwriting analysis, ultrasonic, subsonic, and vibrational disorientation and control, interrogation techniques, drugs that induced speech and amnesia, sensory deprivation and electrosleep, radiation, genetic research including gene splicing and the creation of mutations, ESP, various forms of brainwashing, personality assessment, concussions produced by remote control, brain implants and electrodes, the use of prostitutes as agents, hormonal and glandular products, gases, poisons, drug agents that could be sprayed, and drugs, including LSD, amphetamines, morphine, nicotine, ether, psychedelic mushrooms, barbiturates, heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. At least 4 of the MKUltra programs were specifically conducted on children. This is the vast substructure of MKUltra experimentation that has, for the greater part, been successfully concealed by the agency. One early MKUltra experiment had agents driving a 1953 Mercury through the streets of New York City, an altered tailpipe belching of unspecified gas that was probably laced with LSD. LSD was also sprayed in the New York subways, with the results undocumented in extant paperwork. And an unspecified gas sprayed and dissipated off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. The CIA was only too aware that it was engaged in illegal research and cautioned its employees about secrecy. In 1957, CIA Inspector General Lyman issued an internal memo warning that precautions must be taken not only to protect the operations from exposure to enemy forces, but also to conceal these activities from the American public in general. The knowledge that the agency is engaged in unethical and illicit activities would have serious repercussions in political and diplomatic circles and would be detrimental to the accomplishment. One of those unethical and illicit activities may have been the elimination of the Black American entertainer and political activist Paul Robeson. Aside from his involvement in the struggle for Black rights in the U.S., Robeson had also campaigned for the colonial independence movement abroad, as led by men like Jomo Kenyatta and Jawaharlal Nehru. In the spring of 1961, 3 weeks before the CIA's Bay of Pigs fiasco, Robeson traveled to Moscow, where he had meetings and interviews and gave speeches. The next stop on Robeson's itinerary was to be Cuba, where he was scheduled to meet Fidel Castro. Then he planned to head back to the United States to continue his commitment to civil rights activism. Robeson, according to the people who were with him in Russia, was in unusually good spirits. After a surprise party at his Moscow hotel, Robeson suddenly felt possessed by extreme paranoia. He went off by himself and tried to kill himself by cutting his wrists. Robeson was admitted to the Priory Hospital in London, where within 36 hours, he was given the first of 54 electroconvulsive shock sessions that he would eventually receive. Robeson was never to fully recover from the sudden paranoid bout or from the electroshock. Now, in 1999, Robeson's son has presented formal appeals to British, American, and Russian intelligence agencies for the release of classified materials relating to his father's visit to Moscow and his subsequent medical treatment. He believes that the symptoms that his father exhibited suggest he was poisoned by the CIA with the psychoactive chemical BZ in order to halt the entertainer's visit to Havana and to nullify him as a force in the civil rights movement. Robeson Jr. cites the fact that there had been previous attempts on his father's life, as well as the fact that 2 of the doctors who treated him in London were linked to MK-Ultra. Of course. MK-Ultra was administratively reformed as MK-Search in 1963, running until 1973. Among the MK-Ultra sub-projects that were carried over was one of the paranormal and the use of ESP for espionage. This project was said to have been discontinued in 1973, but it is documented as having continued until 1984. In 1977, a Senate Select Committee on Intelligence was convened to gaze into the darkness that was MK-Ultra. Here we go. According to Senator Edward Kennedy testifying before the committee, perhaps most disturbing of all was the fact that the extent of experimentation on human subjects was unknown. The records of all these activities were destroyed in January of 1973 at the instruction of then CIA Director Richard Helms. In spite of persistent inquiries by both the Health Subcommittee and the Intelligence Committee, no additional records or information were forthcoming. And no single individual could be found who remembered the details. Not the director of the CIA, who ordered the documents destroyed, not the official responsible for the program, nor any of his associates. That's interesting. In confirmation of my own belief that there was a vast MK-Ultra continent, of which we have only been given a glimpse, is the statement of ex-CIA officer Miles Copeland, speaking in an interview with journalist John Marks. Copeland said, "The Congressional Subcommittee which went into this sort of thing got only the barest glimpse. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, an earlier mentioned MK-Ultra mastermind, may have died by the same sword he lived by. In 1999, several new court trials were in progress for victims seeking compensation for experimentation performed upon them by the CIA. According to persons who had talked to Gottlieb, he suspected that the current CIA administration was going to target him as the scapegoat for the MK-Ultra atrocities. There has been speculation that Gottlieb was not willing to take the fall for the agency and was ready to blow the whistle on what had gone on. But Gottlieb died on March 10, 1999, at a very fortuitous time for the agency. Although the information that has been revealed about CIA mind control projects constitutes only the tip of the research, what has been revealed is a national shame that should have leveled the CIA, as John F. Kennedy had proposed doing shortly before his assassination. We know that from the beginning, the CIA employed citizens in mind control experimentation and other mutilations without their consent. In these experiments, lives were destroyed, minds and bodies shattered, all ostensibly in the interest of the military-industrial complex's Cold War. Congress has estimated that 23,000 persons were experimented on under the auspices of MK-Ultra. But given the fact that much of the documentation for that program was destroyed, it is difficult to understand how they could have made such a precise determination? Certainly, most researchers in the field would say that the figure was a gross underestimate in horror. It is plain that during its history, the CIA has been the prime player in formulating a secret science of mind control that has only been hinted at in the controlled media. Extensive research suggests that advanced techniques of control were created far in advance of anything that the agency has ever been willing to admit to. The CIA and its successor agencies, such as the National Security Agency, must not be seen as instruments for furthering American security, but as arms of the planetary controllers for maintaining their own dominion. These agencies primarily further the elitists' own interests, including the implementation of plans of eugenics, social control, monopolistic control of resources, and other forms of the suppression of the masses worldwide. Uno momento, I'm going to close my shade. Just a second. Okay. Now, I have no idea if anybody's watching. I think there's a few people watching, but I would like to say that I want to share my personal experience with some of this because I have personally been through some of these experimentations and these particular experimental technologies that were administered. I have hence been able to work with protocols to get myself out of MK Ultra mind control programming. I've been in several programs along the way, which included psychic warfare and mostly psychic abilities, and also torture, trauma-based mind control, bloodletting, and them using my DNA to create soldiers that are super. So as a child, the torture started immediate. I was sold pre-birth into these programs, and so those specific programs that my father sold me into were, and the reason I put it that way is because technically that's what happened. The military had control of me through these programs, and my father was not actually privy to a lot of the information of what was actually happening to me in the physical while I was in these programs. He just did what he was told, and he got paid for it. He was told and given this idea and programmed to believe that eugenics was a positive thing, and that so he wasn't deeply involved in the processing of eugenics. In other words, he wasn't a scientist that was doing the eugenicist prerogatives. However, he was involved in authoring and developing the Sidewinder missile and being involved in military projects and top secret military projects. So the sad part about that is that he didn't receive the credit that he deserved for all the work that he did for all of those, 50 years that he was employed by the Navy or, the United States government. as a contractor, and also, having been in the Navy himself. So in that regard, it was really sad because he didn't ever receive credit for all the most amazing work that he basically did over those years. His name was never on the internet. Like, literally, he was not given credit for his life's body of work. And at the same time, there's a lot of people that we don't even know exist, and that are caught in the deep state's CIA, all of those secret agencies that operate behind the scenes, that nobody ever sees those people, and they are sworn into secrecy, and some of them are single and they never meet anybody, and they live their entire lives in an underground base, and they have absolutely no idea what the real world is like. This is real, you guys. And what's happening right now is those underground bases are getting destroyed and blown up, because a lot of those underground bases were housing mind control experimentation and hybrid breeding programs and, ritual sacrifice of children. And so at the time when I was involved in those programs as a child, I was also involved. So I was signed up for 2 different programs, and those programs made me privy to a different level of this. However, I was also in a trauma-based mind control program, right? Or many. And my personality was split. And for whatever reason, I was able to keep my core personality, but I had all of these different fragments and fragmentations of my personality due to the electroshock, electrocution that I endured, and the drugging. And I had the truth drug administered to me many, many times. And through the MyLab abductions and things of that nature. So the fact that I'm sitting here right now, able to have a conversation with you and to have my brain somewhat sorted out, is actually a tremendous miracle, because where I come from, or the type of person that I am, quote unquote, people like me do not survive, usually past 30 years old. And when they do recover their mind swipe and their memories come back online, there is a concerted effort to eliminate that person, to take them out, to kill them, so that they can't talk, so they can't speak about it, and they can't express so they're always being monitored. And so for me, I survived direct hits on my life every 2 weeks for most of my life, until I left the United States of America, which they tried to prevent me from doing. And then once I was gone, they still had access to me, in other parts of the world, until I removed the trackers and was able to dismantle all the trackers that were on me, that were keeping me monitored at all times, right? And it was only at that point that I actually felt, for the first time in my life, like a normal human being, and I was invisible, like I was actually invisible, and that I couldn't be tracked or traced. And I was living in a town with no police, which was kind of cool, in England, in a very small town. And I was able to literally breathe for the first time in my life. And within like 10 days of me going and living in this town, my entire life shifted on a dime, and I started making a bunch of money, and I became abundant, and my life got really happy, and I was feeling all this beautiful energy flowing through my reality. It was absolutely a gorgeous experience. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to have that experience, so that I was able to gain strength. Because before that point, I had to rebuild my entire system with cell salts and homeopathics. I had to go through triage and have my life saved several times. There were so many times where I didn't think I was going to make it. And that's not the case today. Today, I'm grounded. I'm in my body. I'm fully embodied, and I'm fully in my power. And, you know, I've kept my mouth shut for a really, 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 really long time. I've been waiting. You know, I've been waiting to talk, waiting to say, waiting to share. And it's still not at a point where I feel like I'm going to completely share my story, but at least I can give you little tidbits. I can give you bits and pieces of information. For one, to let you know that it's real and that here's someone who has survived all the levels of it. And two, what that has brought forth in me in terms of my divine mission and what I'm here to do and what I'm capable of doing, and working with others on a level that I feel very blessed to have available to me in terms of the awareness that I have to be able to function as a energy worker and someone who can operate outside of the regular system, right? I feel very blessed and fortunate to have that opportunity and to be grounded in it. And it's taken me a really long time to get there. Really long time. And I'm 51 now. And I've survived 21 years past what was expected of my life expectancy. And in fact, it was my life expectancy, I was told, was 25. And I've survived and I'm 51. So I'm kind of a living miracle to me. For me, I feel like a living miracle, and I'm just deeply grateful for every day of my life. It's hard for me to get depressed because I know that the life that I'm living, I wouldn't be living had I not been given the tools and the protocols to get out of the MK Ultra mind control programming. And I was fortunate and blessed enough to receive those. And now I'm here to dismantle that programming from the collective, personally and also on a collective level. And so my mission is strong, and I know what it is. And it keeps growing, and I just keep listening deeper and deeper into where Source is guiding this to go and what direction it's going in. And so with that, I just feel like I'm so completely blessed to have the experience of having survived all of that and to be thriving in a world where everything is locked down into a grid, you know, and I'm outside of that grid, and I'm thriving. So if that gives anybody hope, I just really want you to hear that it's possible to survive anything. And it's, at the end of the day, our energy bodies are the most important. Our electrical circuitries and how they flow and how the energy moves through our bodies is our central nervous system. We're vibrational beings. We're electrical beings. And so the reason why they were able to do all of this mind control research is because they were using electroshock therapy and they were using drugs to alter the consciousness, to alter the state of the brain, and to be able to bring people in other states of awareness and to see how far they could take it, right? But with certain people, though, in the military, secret military programs, they went about it in a very different way. They cultivated them and groomed them in their family members, their family members. They literally groomed their own family members, okay? So I feel so completely grateful that I was given the opportunity to get myself out. Nobody helped me get out. I got myself out. Nobody fucking helped me. Nobody. I got myself out of mind control on my own. And every single person has the full responsibility to get themselves out of this programming that is being consistently pumped through the airwaves, through the black mirror technology of the internet and computers and phones. We have a responsibility to stay fully embodied and to stay grounded with the earth, because where we're going, yes, those components will be present, but they're not going to be the reality. It's a false matrix that has been established that they are harvesting everybody's loosh from. And it's our choice whether or not we choose to give our vital life force energy over to this energy, or to remain intact and to allow our source energy to be our prime directive. And so with that, I think I am complete for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I super appreciate that you're tuning into this. I feel like this is the most practical way right now for me to share about what's happening in our collective on a collective level, to help people understand how deep this goes and how long this has been going on, so that we can really understand that it is being uprooted right now and it's all being dismantled and reorganized and repurposed and recalibrated on all the levels, multidimensionally and beyond. But in the physical, this is the last frontier of releasing and unlocking, all the suppression that has been present in our society under the radar, right? So it's crucial that we pay attention to the levels of information that are available to us out of a simple book that was written in 1999. And this guy, that's before the internet. So there was a lot of research done through books, other books that were written to verify and collect this information. It wasn't just like a rando internet situation. Research. It is always good to go back and look at the books that were written from the year 2000 and before, because they didn't have the same level of information and research capacity that we do as Google. Just Google it. Well, these guys had to go into libraries and sit there and read. It took a long time to write this book. He just didn't speak it into a speaker and dictate it into a freaking program that then became a book. It doesn't work like that. So these people are verified authors to me. They worked hard for this, I respect that. So anyway, with that, I'm going to say goodbye for now. Blessings to you all. I hope you're having a beautiful Sunday. It was a gorgeous day today. I hope you got outside and got some fresh air. And I love you. And I will see you soon. Probably tomorrow. Okay. Bye.